Good evening, everyone. This is the evening drive home, and I'm NJ Evans. And this evening, what I'd like to do is salute some of the people that I have encountered in my career. And I think what really prompted all of this was the transition or the death of Angela Bofield. I met Angela when I was in Houston, Texas, and she was just a beautiful, beautiful spirit. Really, really very nice person. And we sat and we talked just before she went on stage to give her outstanding performance. And we found out that we had a lot in common, a lot in common. And I was just listening to how our paths had separated. I was a musician, she was a musician, but my musical career didn't really develop. It was my journalism side, my filmmaking that really developed and pushed me forward. And in those days, I had a very clear voice, very clear, crystal clear. And right now, it seems to be dealing with the elements in the area. So do forgive me as I continue. But Angela and I spoke, and I think the first thing that we noticed was that we were the same height and had that same, you're not really from here look, and yet very kind spirit. We talked about the event, it was in Houston, Texas, and we spoke about the heat as well as the various individuals and the acts that were coming up and the differences in the quality of things at that time. And that was a few years ago. But I was really, really prompted this evening to come online because I didn't know her intimately in the sense that we were on the phone every day speaking. That wasn't it. But I knew her through her music. And my introduction to Angela was my mother. My mother had said to me one day, "Do you want to know what you sound like?" And she put this young lady's voice on one of her records. And I said, "You got to be kidding me." So from that point forward, I've been following her career and listening to the kind of music that she writes because she was a writer and she was a very good writer. And we talked about her daughter and whether or not she really wanted her daughter in the industry itself, because if you don't have backup and you don't have somebody watching your back, this is not a cool idea to venture into on your own. I don't care who you are. It's not. It's too much, especially without any support. But that's not the reason for this conversation. This conversation was to just share some of the people that I've met. I met Angela Oldfield prior to Phyllis Hyman really taking off. I met her at the New York Times. I was working there at that time. And we both were on the elevator. I looked at her, she looked at me, and we both started the same conversation. "Girl, you kind of tall." "Yeah, you kind of tall too." She outweighed me at the time, but she was definitely kind of tall. And from there, we had lunch together and we talked about the industry itself. I was a photographer at that time. Okay. So it was more exciting to sit down and have a conversation with her than it was to sit down and actually do an interview. Later on, I would encounter her a few more times because of different people that knew her, and I would go backstage and have that kind of type of conversation with Phyllis Hyman. And Phyllis's transition also hurt my heart a lot because I felt once again through her music, I understood who she was, just like Angela. I also didn't like that Angela didn't have really the support in my definition. This is a personal observation from the music industry. As so many musicians, when they reach a certain point or if they become sick, they don't have the support, financial support, that they need just to live, just to exist. And she fell into that too. Phyllis's story was a little bit different, but she was hurt as well. And then we have others. But the ones that I really wanted to talk about were the ones that I had a connection with, a real connection with, not only through their music, but actually an encounter one on one with them, via phone or not. Example, here's another example. Now, most of all these interviews that I did them with Pacifica Radio. And when I wasn't with Pacifica Radio, I was with KCOH in Houston, Texas at that time. I think my show was one of the last ones on KCOH before we transitioned over to whatever it is now. Anyway, and one of the things that I found out was that I had an opportunity, I had a platform, and I used it, and I was able to speak to people. So now the other person I'd like to share with you is someone that's a little bit out of the league totally, and that would be Debbie Reynolds. But I always liked Debbie Reynolds. I used to watch her movies. I'm a baby boomer, so that's I kind of grew up on Debbie Reynolds and some others. And she was just as kind as she could possibly be. Very, very kind as she could possibly be. Talked about the industry, and she was funny. I didn't. I wasn't probing. I wasn't on that avenue. I've never really been a prober, a person who's gonna, if that's such a word, because I will develop my own dictionary one day. Anyway, I never really focused on probing into the various aspects of people's lives. My thing was just basically tell me who you are, what do you do, why do you do what you do, what were some of the challenges that you met in your life. And of course, with each one of these ladies that I've mentioned so far, you could tell what the challenges were because they were very visible. And then there's, let me see, who would be the other person that I would like to mention? Donna Summers. Donna was in town to have an event in Houston and at the concert hall. And I had an opportunity to speak with her on the phone before she arrived in Houston. She was still in Memphis. And it was so unique to hear her speak as if she had known me for years. We spoke for about an hour about everything, her background, the church, going to Europe, the discriminations that she met here in this country, more so than even in Europe, and then also the fact of her music, and moving in a direction that her background, her family background, coming from the church, would not normally really be very welcoming, and what she had to deal with in that relationship as well. I liked Donna. I liked them all, everyone that I've mentioned so far. I've liked each and every one of them because they brought to the table a uniqueness, a genuineness. They were real people and they spoke on a real level. So, one of the things that I would use as a takeaway from Donna Summer's conversation, and I'll share something with you. When I decided that I wanted to really share that piece of information that she told me to share with everybody else, which I never did, I had to go through her lawyers, and her lawyer went through her husband, because by this particular point in time, Donna had transitioned. I interviewed her a couple of months before she left, and that sat in my heart because of the kind spirit that she also has. And she was an artist, I mean, a visual artist, which also fascinated me because I was saying, okay, musician, visual artist, oh, interesting. And we spoke about that as well. But to hear her call out to her husband at that time when I was on the phone with her, that felt so cool. It felt like, oh man, this lady has accepted me or kept me in as part of her family unit conversation at that moment. In that moment in time, there wasn't a hold on, Natalie, let me call you right back or muffle the sound or anything like that. She just yelled out, Bruce, blah, 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 blah. I said, girl, you are something else. And I loved it. I loved it. Roy Ayers, I met him and his group, and they were fun. They were just fun, fun, fun guys. And let me see, who else did I meet? I met Sidney Poitier. He was fine. He was kind of stoic. And I think the reason why he was stoic was because the woman that was bringing him around to all the journalists at that time, she was kind of, he was muy importante, let's not, don't ask too many questions because he only has 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Mr. Portier is standing there saying, no, ask me anything you want. Here, I'm right here. You got me. Totally different energy field. Met Harry Belafonte. Oh, Harry Belafonte was interesting. I had an opportunity to interview him, and when I arrived at the Hyatt, I believe was the name of the hotel, and all these women, there's a terminology called TNA. Well, that was a lot of that going on right there at that particular hotel, very upscale hotel. It was packed with women, packed from the first floor all the way up to the second floor, which is where he was communing with a group of people inside one of the rooms that they were using as a classroom. So I found his press secretary, and I spoke. And in the midst of all these people, Mr. Belafonte comes to the door. He pushes the door open. He looks across the ocean of people. And I made eye contact with him, and he said to me, Natalie. I said, Harry. And he said, come on, girl. And it was like going across the Gulf of Mexico. There was so many women between the two of us. I reached my hand up to grab his, and he just pulled me across that ocean of women into the classroom, and we had a great time. I was a part of the that minute in which he was involved with a deep conversation with everybody there. It was lovely. I met Stedman. There were so many people that I've met, and I have to really say that this was an interesting and a fabulous journey. I've met politicians. One in particular, I you could say my career started with him, and that was at the time he was a state senator from Brooklyn, New York, and later on he became borough president of Brooklyn, and his name is Marty Markowitz. And Marty was fun. Marty was a lot of fun, and I once again I was with the camera, I was doing my thing, and so consequently I was a part of whatever it is that he was doing as well. So it was quite an adventurous period in my life. And there are more people that I've met. I've met some of the ink spots, and so many more. But one of the things that I wanted to share with you is it has been an absolutely fun run. Absolutely fun. And that's what I always felt that if you have an opportunity to have a platform, no matter what it is, it's great if you can use it and share with people. And here's another story. I had a, I was backstage a hot, hot evening. Now, I lived in Houston for 11 years, so that's another thing. I might as well share that with you. Houston. Okay. But then this particular concert, John Lucien was going to be performing. And when he and his entourage was on site and was walking through the corridor, well, it was a way that it was designed that he had to come outside in order to go inside to get to where the dressing rooms were. I don't know whose idea that was, but anyway, they were like floating on air. Everybody had on white cotton, and everybody was quiet. It was mystical. It was very spiritual. And I just loved it. I stood to the side and I just watched this man float past me. I knew I was going to catch up with him later, and I did. I caught up with his wife, and his wife introduced us, and then we did the interview. But to watch them in their element when they're not really aware that they're being observed, but they kind of figure they might be somewhere being observed, this was a golden moment. I'm sharing these moments with you because I don't know if you'll ever know these people. Some of them I'm quite sure you won't. But even those who are here that you can reach out to them with love and light. Those who are older and have their careers, and those who are coming through that are trying to fight and find a career, I would not exchange the era of time that I was born in and the opportunities that I've had for anything. I couldn't trade that off for what's going on now. I wouldn't do that. But I just wanted to share some of that with you because it was memorable and it was exciting, very exciting. And there are many more that I didn't even mention. But these are the ones that were in my heart because I felt like I knew them actually on a personal note, when in actuality, I was no more personal with them than I was with Nancy Wilson, Lena Horne, or any of the others. But it felt like it at that time. Okay? So if you have an opportunity to meet someone, even if it's just a little person walking down the street, instill in that person something of love and gratitude and critical thinking and just having a an awareness of who they are. Lift them up, help them have a clear focus, because we're traveling through times that none of us have ever experienced before. None of us. So, in saying all of that, I will sign off at this point, and I'll let you know that I enjoyed this evening, and I thank you for sharing it with me. And even the people who weren't all that in a bag of potato chips, who might be your everyday person or people, I encountered a lot of those people, those that are behind the scene, as well as those in front. And let me acknowledge one person, because my career would not have ventured this far if it had not been for one man in Brooklyn, New York, whose name was Mark Chernow. He was a student teacher at Brooklyn College, and I was a part of the Model Cities program. And that gentleman saved my life because I got blacklisted at the end of that program. And you can't get blacklisted in the number one job market. That's incredibly stupid. You can't do that. But it was done, and it was done to me. And that young man made sure that he took me down to NYU, where I audited all of his classes and some, and then over to the radio station, WOR, I think it was WOR, and over to Manhattan Cable. And then I just met a plethora of people that were all artists from every walk of life. It was phenomenal. And I had an opportunity to do live news, write news, be on the air, do voiceover work. This was a world that was just fascinating. And every time I went home or went to see my mom and family, they'd ask me, "Do you have a real job yet?" No, I don't. And I don't, and I'm not looking for a real job if there's anything outside of this. No, I don't. It was fun. It was really fun. I'd like to also acknowledge one other person. I had a second, when I was blacklisted, I had to enter in through the educational component. And I pitched an idea to a gentleman who was the executive director of the Bed-Stuy Restoration Community Center. And this gentleman was also a city council member at that time. His name was Richard Green. And Richard helped me by letting me pitch him my whole idea about helping young people, third and fourth grades in particular, via video productions, using that as the tool to incite interest. And not only that, to help them receive that confidence in themselves again. And also look at themselves and see what they look like when they start speaking to people. But Richard Green did that for me. And I had the after school program, and it was a television production class, and it was sponsored by the Brooklyn Museum at that time. It was the first course that was sponsored like that by the Brooklyn Museum. But I wanted to acknowledge Richard Green because he was a genuine, outstanding man. And he loved Bed-Stuy Restoration Community Center with all of his heart. He had a dream. And I hope over the years, because the industry can be very nasty, I hope over the years that he was able to hold on to his dream and that somebody did not try and crush him, because he was a very giving man and an honest one. So he was one of the ones where you did not have to audition on a couch. Your presentation, if you knew what you knew, then show it. And that meant stand there and have that conversation and take somebody and introduce them to television production above and below the line. I thank him for that opportunity. I thank Mark Chernow for his opportunity. I thank, at the time, State Senator Marty Markowitz, as I said before, who became borough president. when he was state senators, when I had my exposure with Marty, and he introduced me to my own community. And I was able to learn a lot about politics to the degree where I never wanted to go into politics. But I thank all of these people. And I thank the encouraging smiles from people like Lena Horne, from people like Nancy Wilson, and from Phyllis Hyman, and from Angela Bofield. And I'm trying to remember all of these people, and my mind is not really providing me with all of them. And I'll tell you somebody else who gave me an opportunity, and I'll say goodbye to her as well, and that's Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She and her entourage, and Sandra Massey Hines, who used to be called the mayor of Sunnyside, or might still be called that. And I thank them very much for helping me to make my inroads into the community in Houston, Texas, so that I could rise, as Angela would say, rise. So, without any further ado, it's been an honor and a pleasure being with you this evening. My little friend Nina has come over to sit next to me and let me know that it's time for me to stop talking to you so I can move on to do something else for her. She's a cat. Anyway, you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I'll be back in touch with you soon. And the story will be totally different because I'll get back on course as to the things that I had promised I would do. Case in point, cybersecurity, identity theft, digital theft, data breach, phishing, and social engineering, and so much more. Take good care of yourself. Remember to create the reality that you truly do desire and not one that you don't. And I'm going to be doing some other work, and I'll let you know about that as well. Thank you for your time. Ciao, everyone. I'm NJ Evans.